Yasaki ran like mad, his heart pounding in his chest as he ran through the dense, scary Nigerian forest. Behind him, a huge hairy man with a club chased after Yasaki. 8 other cannibals followed closely, their ugly cries filling the air as they hunted their prey. Yasaki's breath came in ragged gasps as he pushed his legs to move faster, desperation lending him strength. Ahead, he spotted a cave with a narrow opening, barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through. He ducked inside, bending low to avoid hitting his head. The cave was dark and damp, the air thick with the smell of earth. He pressed himself against the wall, waiting and listening. As the first cannibal thrust his head inside, Yasaki smashed it with a heavy rock, his heart pounding with fear. How had Yasaki found himself in this deadly forest? The story began in the prosperous King Empire in Hausa land, where peace and prosperity reigned under the rule of their emperor, King Hassan. Though King Hassan the emperor was old and very sick, the empire thrived, its people living in safety and harmony. In King Empire lived a strikingly beautiful young girl named Zainab. Her beauty was the talk of the village, captivating every man who laid eyes on her. Men vied for her attention, each hoping to win her hand in marriage. But Zainab was not easily impressed. She rejected suitor after suitor, claiming that no man was worthy of her. Zainab loved the attention her beauty brought and decided to make a spectacle of her suitors. She instructed her father to gather all the men who wished to marry her in the village square. She would announce her demands publicly. On the appointed day, the square was filled with eager suitors, each believing he had what it took to win Zainab's hand in marriage. Most were wealthy and willing to undergo the ancient whip splash ritual, a test of endurance involving 101 lashes on the bare back to prove their strength and worthiness. Although this tradition had fallen out of practice, the men believed that Zainab sought to revive it. Crowds gathered, eager to see what would transpire between Zainab and her numerous suitors. Zainab walked seductively to the center of the square, her every movement mesmerizing the crowd. Her beauty was enchanting, her presence commanding. As she reached the center, she turned to face the assemble of suitors.
"I'll marry the man who meets my 3 demands,"
she announced, her voice clear and unwavering.
"First, he must endure the whip splash."
A collective sigh of relief swept through the crowd. Most of the suitors had prepared for this challenge, believing their wealth would suffice for the remaining demands.
"Secondly,"
Zainab continued,
"he must capture a live black jaguar from the forest."
Gasps of shock echoed through the square. The men had not anticipated such a dangerous task. The forest was treacherous, and capturing a jaguar alive was nearly impossible. But before they could fully process the enormity of her demand, Zainab delivered her final blow.
And thirdly, he must venture into the Nigerian forest and come back with the special apple fruits.
The men were stunned into silence. The Nigerian forest was infamous, inhabited by barbaric cannibals who feasted on human flesh. Few who entered ever returned. The challenge was deadly, and many suitors quickly lost their resolve and walked away. Abdul, the son of Alhaji Zubairu, one of the richest men in the village, stepped forward. Tall and confident, he declared, "I will endure the whip splash for you." I will capture a jaguar and I will retrieve the special apple fruit, and I have money, which means power." Zainab laughed mockingly. "Money does not translate to power," she retorted. "I need a man strong enough to survive the Nigerian forest and bring the fruit to me." Half the suitors left in disgust, unwilling to face the deadly challenge. Only 13 men, including Yasaki and Abdul, remained. Zainab insisted that they undergo the whip splash immediately. The men were unprepared but had no choice. A large man with a long red whip stepped forward, and the crowd watched in anticipation. 2 of the 13 men ran away upon seeing the long, terrifying whip. Their flight drew mockery from the villagers and laughter from Zainab. The remaining men, their determination unshaken, faced the whip. One by one, they stepped up. Many could not endure the whole 101 lashes. They cried out and gave up. Abdul, however, endured the full 101 lashes, his strength and resolve impressive. Yasaki followed next, his tall frame enduring each lash with grit and determination, as did 4 other men. Despite their bravery, Zainab remained unimpressed. She coldly reminded them of the next challenge, which is capturing a live jaguar, and this quest will start in 7 days from now, she told them. The men protested, requesting for 2 weeks to prepare. Zainab was adamant as she walked away, her hips swaying seductively. The men, mesmerized by her beauty, agreed to her terms. 7 days, they vowed, for Zainab's beauty was worth every sacrifice, the remaining suitors believed. After 7 days, the 6 men gathered at the edge of the forest in King Empire. Crowd of people assembled, filled with a mix of awe and disbelief, wondering what drove these men to risk their lives for the sake of a woman. Zainab, basking in the attention, walked among the villagers who parted ways to let her pass. She reveled in the admiration, her beauty and poise captivating everyone. Other young Hausa girls looked on with jealousy, unable to fathom what men found so irresistible about Zainab. Yasaki stood among the 6 men, watching Zainab approach. His back still ached, which was a painful reminder of the ordeal he had endured. He had a flashback to the last 7 days, especially after the whip splash. His back had been torn to shreds, blood dripping from his body as he staggered back to his lonely hut. Yasaki lived alone, his parents having passed away years ago, leaving him with a small farm to manage, and he was the only child his parents had given birth to. He was a hardworking, honest young man, well liked in the village. Tall and strong, with a narrow face, pointed nose, and a beautiful smile. Yasaki wasn't one to chase after women, but that changed the first time he laid eyes on Zainab. Her beauty kept him awake at night, and though he never approached her parents to propose, fearing rejection due to his poverty, he decided to try his luck when Zainab announced her requirements in the village square. Sitting in his hut with a bleeding back, he questioned whether it was worth it.
Inauni.
A sweet female voice greeted. It was Fatima, the daughter of his neighbor. She walked in and gasped at the sight of his wounds, then quickly ran out and returned with water, a towel, and a local balm. She tended to his wounds with care, like family, though they were not related. Yasaki viewed Fatima as a younger sister, despite the small age gap. He was 22 and Fatima just turned 18. She had always been there for him, especially when he was ill. Now injured from the whiplash, she was there to take care of him once more. After treating his wounds, she sat beside him and asked,
What exactly do you want in life?
They stared at each other. Fatima knew he was foolishly chasing Zainab, but she wanted to hear it from his mouth. Yasaki smiled and looked away. Now he was doing something even more foolish, standing with other men about to enter the forest to capture a live black jaguar. Zainab approached the men and announced, You have 5 days to return with a live jaguar. Anyone who does will qualify for the 3rd round. The villagers made an exciting noise as the 6 men entered the forest. Once inside, they spread out, each man for himself. Yasaki ventured deep into the forest. On the 3rd day, after battling hunger and surviving on raw food, he finally spotted a large black jaguar. He drew his long sharp knife and approached from behind, but the jaguar sensed him and chased after him. Yasaki ran fast and climbed a tree, but the jaguar followed. As it neared Yasaki, he threw himself at the jaguar, piercing the jaguar's neck with his knife. They both fell from the tree, wrestling on the ground. The jaguar, weakened by the stab and the poison Yasaki had applied to the blade, soon succumbed. Yasaki tied it up and began walking out of the forest with the live jaguar on his shoulder. As he was moving, another man from the 6 remaining suitors spotted him in the forest. The man had not found a jaguar, and now he eyed Yasaki's prize with envy. The 2 men stared at each other before the other man attacked with so much violence. Yasaki dropped the jaguar and fought back fiercely. Realizing the man intended to kill him, in desperate struggle, Yasaki strangled the man to death. Bleeding and exhausted, he hoisted the jaguar onto his back and walked out of the forest. A cage awaited him, and he placed the live jaguar inside. The next day, Abdul also emerged from the forest with his own jaguar. The empire buzzed with the news of Yasaki and Abdul coming back with a live jaguar, their bravery becoming the talk of the town. Even the ill King Hassan took an interest, eager to see how this tale of courage and sacrifice would unfold. The empire awaited the final episode of Zainab's challenge for her suitors. 2 men remained standing. Abdul, the son of one of the wealthiest men in the empire, and Yasaki, an orphan who owned only a small farmland. Zainab had declared a fortnight's rest for the 2 men, allowing them to prepare for the unthinkable journey into Namajindiri Forest in search of the special fruits. Rumors abounded about the forest. It was said that the special fruit could only be found deep within the forest, where carnivorous beings roamed about. These beings, though humans, had rejected civilization and lived like wild animals in the forest. They dressed half naked with hairs all over their body, and they derived pleasure in hunting and eating human meat. Alhaji Zubairu, Abdul's father, feared for his son's life. He did not want Abdul to go into Namajindiri Forest. One night, he sneaked to Zainab's house and called out to her father. They spoke in whispers, and Zainab's father went inside to speak with Zainab. When he returned, he nodded in agreement with Alhaji Zubairu, who left satisfied. On the day of the quest, only Yasaki stood at the edge of Namajindiri Forest. Even the villagers dared not come close to Namajindiri dreadful forest. Abdul was nowhere to be found, and Zainab was absent. To Yasaki's surprise, he saw Fatima standing there with a look of concern on her face. "Me kike yi anan?" "What are you doing here?" Yasaki asked.
Please, Yasaki, Karkaje, do not go.
Fatima pleaded, her voice trembling with worry. Yasaki refused. "I must go. This is my chance." Fatima persisted.
How can you be sure the quest is still on? Zainab isn't here. The villagers are not here. And Abdul, your only competitor, is not here either. Wouldn't it be wise to confirm first?
Yasaki thought for a moment. "Yes, you make a lot of sense. Let me go." He went to Zainab's house, where her father met him at the door. "I want to see Zainab," Yasaki said. "The quest is still on. You are free to enter the forest," Zainab's father replied, looking disinterested. "What about Abdul? Has he entered the forest?" Yasaki asked. "That is none of your business," Zainab's father snapped, before walking away, leaving Yasaki feeling foolish. Returning to the forest edge, Yasaki found Fatima still waiting. "The competition is still on. I must hurry before Abdul finds the fruit," he told her. Fatima looked at him, her eyes filled with tears. "How can you be sure Abdul is already in the forest?" she asked. He waved her off, eager to begin the quest. Fatima embraced him, crying,
Please, be careful.
He stood mesmerized by her care and genuine concern for his safety. She handed him a small bottle.
Rub this liquid on your forehead when you are in real trouble. Use it wisely. My grandmother gave me this before she died, but I am sacrificing it for you.
"What is it for?" he asked. "Don't worry, you will find out," Fatima replied. Yasaki thanked her, and holding his sword, he ventured into Nigerian forest. For 2 nights, he walked deeper into the dreadful, scary woods. On the 3rd night, he saw a campfire. Feeling relieved, he approached the fire. But as he got closer, he realized the people around the fire were not ordinary humans. They were carnivorous beings he had heard about, ugly faces covered in hair, emitting a foul odor with huge teeth. They made noises like gorillas, and upon seeing him, they sprang up to chase him. Yasaki's first instinct was to fight. He drew his sword, but there were nearly 10 of them, each wielding thick wooden clubs. Fighting bravely, he killed one of them, and this enraged the others, and they charged at Yasaki with ferocious anger. When one of the cannibals snatched his sword and broke it with his bare hands, Yasaki turned and ran away. He ran for his dear life, panting and dodging the stones they threw at him. At one point, they pounced on him, hitting him hard with their clubs. Slipping through their grasp, he ran like lightning. He saw a cave with a narrow opening. He ducked inside, bending low to avoid hitting his head. The cave was dark and damp, the air thick with a smell of earth. He pressed himself against the wall, waiting and listening. As the first cannibal thrust his head inside the cave, Yasaki smashed it with a heavy rock, his heart pounding with fear. One by one, the other cannibals foolishly stuck their heads into the cave, and he killed them all. Despite his victory, he didn't leave the cave, fearing more might come at him. His body was bleeding heavily from the injuries he sustained during the fight. Remembering the small bottle Fatima had given him, he took it out and rubbed the liquid on his forehead, The sweet fragrance was soothing, and his wounds began to heal like magic. He could breathe normally again. He wanted to search for the fruit, but was afraid to leave the cave. Then he heard a beautiful song, a girl singing in a beautiful melodious voice.
I'll be here waiting for you. I'll be here praying for you. Karkajin soro Yasaki. Karkajin soro Yasaki.
Fatima's singing gave him courage, and he stepped out of the cave. Right in front of the cave, he saw a tree with a shining fruit. He plucked it and ran towards the singing voice, which led him out of the forest. Standing right there in front of the forest was Fatima. She was waiting for him all along. She ran to him and embraced him tightly. As Yasaki and Fatima walked into the village, they attracted attention with the special fruits Yasaki held in his hands. The villagers rushed out, cheering him on. Yasaki basked in the attention and walked so fast that Fatima could not keep up with him. Eager to present the fruits, Yasaki hurried to Zainab's house. "Wayene Agida, who is at home?" he shouted. Zainab's father emerged slowly, looking unimpressed. Yasaki presented the fruit, and the crowd erupted in cheers. Hearing the commotion, Zainab appeared, looking radiant. She walked majestically towards Yasaki, stretched out her hand, and Yasaki handed her the fruit. Without even looking at him, she held the fruit high. She began to dance, mesmerizing the villagers with her graceful moves. Abdul emerged from the crowd, showering her with money as she danced. As the crowd dispersed, Yasaki demanded, "When is our wedding date?" For the first time since the quest began, Zainab looked at him with a condescending expression. "Karkadamu, don't worry, we will give you a wedding date," she said dismissively before walking back into her hut. Days turned into weeks, and Zainab and her father still had not given Yasaki a date. Rumors spread that Alhaji Zubairu, Abdul's father, had paid a hefty dowry for Zainab to marry Abdul. It was believed that Alhaji Zubairu had arranged with the elder council for Abdul to be the next emperor after King Hassan, who had no son. Abdul was seen as a warrior and a fighter, and his father's wealth and influence helped. Alhaji Zubairu promised Zainab that she would become queen if she married Abdul. They had conspired to let Yasaki go into Namijin Forest alone, believing he would die there. But Yasaki survived and returned with the fruit, thwarting their plans. In desperation, they framed Yasaki for robbery by planting stolen yams in his house. However, the villagers, knowing Yasaki's honesty, did not believe he stole the yams. Alhaji Zubairu and Zainab's father continued to look for ways to implicate him. Feeling cheated and stressed, Yasaki walked into a nearby bush and started crying. He was an orphan with no one to support him, and he had risked his life for Zainab, only to be denied his rights. As he cried, he sensed someone approaching from behind. Turning around, he saw Fatima walking towards him with a caring smile. For the first time, Yasaki noticed Fatima's beauty. Her slim figure, oval-shaped face, luscious lips, and feminine curves. He felt a desire for her, and as he came closer, he perceived her lovely fragrance. He smiled and asked, "Mekikeyanan, what are you doing here?"
I came looking for you because I saw you walk into the bush.
Fatima replied. Yasaki smiled and wiped the tears from his face.
Why are you crying?
Fatima asked. Karkidamu, do not worry, he replied. And he added, I am curious to know why you are always there for me, Fatima. Every time I am in trouble, you are always there. Why? Fatima looked him straight in the eyes and said,
Ina sonka. I love you.
Her words were filled with passion and sincerity. Yasaki instantly grabbed her and kissed her. Meanwhile, King Hassan, surrounded by his counselors and the elders of the empire, were deliberating on who would be the next emperor, since King Hassan had no heir. A man who endured 101 lashes brought back a live jaguar and went into Namijinderi Forest to retrieve the special fruit, was brave enough to lead the empire. They decided that Yasaki is a prime candidate for the next emperor of the kingdom. The news spread quickly throughout the empire. Unaware of the announcement, Yasaki and Fatima walked out of the bush together. As they walked, people stared at them and they wondered why. Suddenly, a messenger on horseback approached them, demanding that Yasaki follow him to the palace. Fatima encouraged him to go, promising to join him there. At the palace, Yasaki found King Hassan on the throne, surrounded by his full council. Yasaki knelt before the emperor. The king interviewed Yasaki, listening to his stories and his views on life. After an hour of conversation, King Hassan declared Yasaki the next emperor. The people in the hall shouted with joy, and the news spread like wildfire. When Yasaki emerged in front of the palace, a huge crowd awaited him, chanting his name. He stood tall on the podium, and suddenly Zainab emerged from the crowd. She climbed the podium and knelt beside him, the crowd falling silent.
My future king, I am here for you. I have a date for our wedding, just as I promised,
Zainab announced. She only did this because she had heard Yasaki was to be the next emperor. She wanted not just wealth, but also political power, and Yasaki now possessed both. Yasaki looked at her and said, Nyarinya, bana sonki. Woman, I don't love you. You are greedy and selfish. I thought I loved you, but I was actually infatuated with your looks. I am wiser now. After speaking, he looked up and saw Fatima standing in the crowd. Come here, Fatima, he called. Fatima climbed the podium in front of the palace as the crowd watched. With Zainab still kneeling, Yasaki took Fatima's hand and said, Fatima, Nasonki, I love you. Will you marry me? Fatima inhaled deeply, saying nothing. Yasaki got on his knees. I am so sorry for neglecting you all this while. When you showed me love and support, even though I had nothing, you were always there for me. I wouldn't have made it out of Namijinderi Forest if it wasn't for you. I love you and I promise to take care of you. Please, will you marry me? Tears of joy streamed down Fatima's face. The crowd held their breath as she finally said,
Yes, my Yasaki. I will marry you.
The villagers erupted in thunderous celebration. Zainab ran home in shame, and some people who spotted her laughed at her. The crowd in front of the palace celebrated with loud shouts of excitement for the love between Yasaki and Fatima. The people of Gurkin Kingdom in Hausa land sang praises to their future king and queen.